The year is 1893. Remember that year. It is a hinge point in a history you were never meant to know. In Washington, the politicians congratulate themselves on the 400th anniversary of a contrived discovery. In Chicago, they build a white city of plaster and steel, a temporary monument to a temporary empire, illuminated by the dangerous, flickering magic of alternating current. They speak of progress. They speak of manifest destiny. They speak of a future forged from steel and steam, a world made small by the telegraph and the railroad. They are lying. They are not building a new world. They are building a fence around the ruins of an old one. Far from the gleaming, temporary palaces of the world's Columbian Exposition, out in the vast, unquiet wilderness of the Sierra Nevada, a man named Elias Thorne is about to uncover the lie. Elias Thorne is not a man of politics or philosophy. He is a man of precision, a cartographer, a surveyor contracted by the United States Geological Survey, tasked with charting the unforgiving topography of the newly designated Yosemite National Park. He is a man of the theodolite and the Gunter's chain, of meticulous calculations and handwritten ledgers. His world is one of angles, elevations, and the unwavering certainty of mathematics. He believes in what he can measure. He is working on a new series of topographical maps, employing a novel technique of contour mapping that promises unprecedented accuracy. For weeks, he and his small team have been battling the terrain. The thin air, the brutal sun, the granite that seems to push back against their every footstep. They are mapping the high country, the soaring domes and jagged peaks that the tourists in the valley below see only as a majestic, distant backdrop. It is on a Tuesday in late August that the anomaly first appears, not in the world of rock and sky, but in the world of paper and graphite. Thorne is in his tent, the canvas glowing amber in the lantern light, transferring the day's field measurements onto his master chart. His brow is furrowed in concentration. The numbers are not adding up. The readings from the northern ridge of the Tuolumne Meadows region, a place they had spent the last 3 days charting, are impossible. He checks his calculations. Then he checks them again. He wakes his assistant, a young, eager man from Boston, and has him verify the figures. The figures are correct. The instrument is sound. The methodology is flawless. But the map it produces is a fiction, a geological absurdity. Where a series of cascading, irregular peaks should be, the data describes something else entirely. A vast, unnaturally level plateau. A tabletop spanning nearly 20 square miles, with an elevation that varies by less than 3 feet across its entire surface. And its edges, according to the triangulations, are not the product of fracture and erosion. They are clean, almost mathematically perfect in their curvature, describing a section of an immense circle. It is as if someone had taken a colossal knife and sliced the top off the mountain range. Thorne is a pragmatist. He believes in his data, but he trusts his eyes more. The next morning, leaving his team behind, he sets out alone before dawn. He tells them he is searching for a new triangulation point, a higher vantage from which to resolve the discrepancy. It is a lie. He is going to see the impossibility for himself. The climb takes him 8 hours. It is a grueling ascent, over scree fields and through stands of gnarled, ancient junipers. The air grows thin and cold. Twice, he almost turns back, the rational part of his mind insisting that he is on a fool's errand, chasing a ghost born of tired eyes and faulty arithmetic. But the numbers haunt him. The perfect, impossible circle. He reaches the summit, or what should have been the summit, just after 2 in the afternoon. He pulls himself over the final granite ledge and stands. And the world as he knows it ends. It is exactly as the numbers foretold. He stands on the edge of a plain. It stretches before him, a vast, flat expanse of stone, impossibly level, disappearing into the hazy distance. It is not a meadow. Nothing grows here. It is a pavement of seamless, reddish-brown rock, scoured by millennia of wind and ice. The sheer scale is disorienting. It feels less like the top of a mountain and more like the surface of a dead planet. He walks out onto the plateau. His boots make no sound. The silence is absolute, a crushing weight that seems to absorb all noise. He walks for what feels like a mile, the landscape unchanging. He checks his compass. He is walking in a straight line toward the center of the geometric anomaly. Then he sees it. a pattern in the stone. It is not the random cracking of weathered rock. It is a grain, faint but undeniable. Long, sweeping lines, like the grain in a piece of wood, all flowing in the same direction. He kneels, his hand trembling slightly as he touches the surface. It is cool and smooth, yet it possesses a texture, a microstructure that feels fibrous, organic. He pulls a geologist's hammer from his pack and strikes the surface. The sound is a dull, resonant thud, unlike any rock he has ever struck. It does not chip or fracture. A small, powdered residue is left where the hammer fell. He walks on, his eyes scanning the ground. The patterns become more pronounced. He sees immense, circular formations embedded in the flat surface, some hundreds of yards in diameter. They look like the cross-section of colossal tubes or pores. He is standing in a forest of ghosts. He is walking on the stump of something that was once alive. The realization does not come in a flash of insight. It seeps into him, a cold dread that starts in his gut and spreads through his limbs. The scale is the barrier. The human mind is not built to comprehend it. He is an ant crawling on the floor of a cathedral, trying to understand the concept of a vaulted ceiling. He takes samples. With his hammer and chisel, he manages to break off several small fragments from the edge of one off of the circular patterns. He wraps them carefully in canvas and places them in his satchel. He spends 2 more hours on that impossible plane, taking measurements, sketching what he sees in his private journal, his scientific mind desperately trying to impose order on the inconceivable. He sketches the grain, the circular tubes, the sheer, curved cliff at the edge. He writes notes. Composition unknown. Feels biological. Structure suggests immense petrified growth. Scale defies all known terrestrial botany. When he returns to the camp, he is a changed man. The world of clean lines and predictable angles is gone. He says nothing to his team about what he saw. He cannot. What words could possibly contain it? That night, he drafts his report to the survey headquarters. He sticks to the facts. The topographical data, the anomalous formation, the existence of a plateau not indicated on any prior map. He mentions the unusual geological composition, but refrains from using the word biological. He knows how it will sound. He sends the report and a small, carefully packaged sample with a courier the next week. The response is swift and silent. 2 weeks later, 2 men arrive at his camp. They are not geologists. They are from the Department of the Interior, dressed in city clothes that look absurdly out of place in the high country. They are polite, but their eyes are cold. They inform Thorne that his contract has been terminated, effective immediately. There has been a re-evaluation of survey priorities. His work, they say, is to be archived pending review. They confiscate everything. His master charts, his field notes, his calculation ledgers, his private journal, and, most importantly, the samples he had collected from the plateau. When he protests, one of the men places a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that is meant to seem reassuring but feels like a threat. "Mr. Thorne," the man says, his voice quiet and devoid of emotion. "You are a man who understands the importance of accurate maps. Some maps are too accurate to be useful. Your work here is done." He is given an escort back to San Francisco and a train ticket back to his home in Ohio. He is warned, in no uncertain terms, that the data he collected is now classified federal property. To speak of it, to reproduce it, to even allude to it, would be a violation of federal law. Elias Thorne, the man of precision, is erased. His impossible discovery is buried in a vault, and the official maps are redrawn. The plateau he charted is replaced with a cluster of imaginary peaks. A fiction is created to paper over a truth that is too large to see. But here's what they don't want you to know. Elias Thorne's story is not an isolated incident. It is a single thread in a vast and intricate tapestry of suppression. A concerted, century-long effort to hide the true nature of our world from the people who live on it. They tell you that the great natural wonders of this continent, the mesas of Arizona, the buttes of Utah, the majestic plateaus of Colorado, are the result of slow, geological processes, uplift and erosion, wind and water, millions of years of patient, mindless carving. They give you a story of sand and time, a comfortable, linear narrative that places our civilization at the pinnacle of a long, slow climb from primordial ooze. They're lying. The evidence is all around us, hidden in plain sight, cordoned off by the very institutions that claim to be preserving it. The truth is this: the American national parks are not wildlife preserves. They are not monuments to natural beauty. They are quarantine zones. They are evidence lockers, the largest crime scenes in the history of the world, and the crime they are hiding is the murder of a planet. What if the world is not what we think it is? What if the ground beneath our feet is not stone, but a tombstone? Welcome to the story they tried to erase. Welcome to the world of the great petrified forest. The official narrative is a fragile thing. It is built on consensus, repetition, and the careful omission of inconvenient facts. To shatter it, you don't need a mountain of new evidence. You just need to look at the old evidence with new eyes. You need to listen to the whispers that were silenced, the reports that were buried, the witnesses who were discredited. Let us return to the late 19th century. The age of steam and steel was also an age of extraction. Mining, logging, and railroad construction were tearing into the American landscape on an unprecedented scale. Men were digging deeper and cutting farther than ever before. And they were finding things that did not fit. Consider the account of one Jacob Ellison, a logger in the Oregon Territory in 1881. His testimony was never published in a scientific journal. It exists only as a series of letters he wrote to his sister in Missouri, letters that were preserved by his family and discovered by an independent researcher a century later. Ellison and his crew were working a claim in the Cascade Mountains, clearing vast swathes of old-growth fir and cedar. Their work was hard, dangerous, and monotonous, until they found the root. They were using dynamite to clear a particularly large, stubborn stump. After one blast, they discovered they hadn't just cleared the stump. They had opened a hole, a chasm leading down into the dark. The foreman, a practical man concerned only with schedules and profits, wanted to fill it in and move on. But Ellison and a few others, their curiosity piqued, lowered a lantern into the abyss. The light revealed something that did not belong in the heart of a mountain. It was not a cave or a lava tube. It was a network of colossal, intertwining tunnels, each one perfectly cylindrical, some as wide as a freight train. The walls were not rock. They were a smooth, dark material that seemed to absorb the light, and they were covered in a fine, fibrous texture, like petrified bark. Ellison, in his letters, describes it with the simple, awe-filled language of a man confronted with the impossible. "It is like the root cellar of God," he wrote. "We followed one of the passages for what must have been a quarter-mile. It twists and turns, joining with others, weaving a pattern like a great rope. The air is cold and still, and it smells of ozone and wet earth. We are not in a mountain. We are inside the root of a tree that was so large its very memory would break a man's mind." The logging company shut down the operation within a week. The official reason given was a geological instability that made the area unsafe. The men were paid off and told to keep quiet. The entrance to the chasm was dynamited shut, buried under 1,000 tons of rock and soil. A story of a mining prospect gone bust was circulated. The memory was paved over. But Jacob Ellison never forgot. He spent the rest of his life haunted by the image of those dark, silent, perfectly round tunnels, the petrified vascular system of a forgotten world. Anaphora is a powerful tool. They say it was a mining accident. They say it was a geological survey error. They say it was a local legend, a tall tale told by uneducated men. They say these things over and over, until the lie becomes the truth. But here is what they do not mention. They do not mention the report from the Kennecott copper mine in Utah, dated 1904. A report that was buried in corporate archives and only came to light through a whistleblower in the 1970s. A team of miners, pushing a new shaft deep into a mesa, broke through into a vast, hollow chamber. Inside, they did not find a cavern. They found a structure. The report describes a vast, geodesic space, lined with hexagonal cells that glittered in the lamplight. The cells were made of a reddish, crystalline material, and a viscous, amber-like substance coated the walls. The air was thick with a strange, aromatic scent, and the miners who entered the space complained of disorientation and headaches. The company geologist who was sent to investigate wrote a single, panicked telex to his superiors before he was recalled, and the section of the mine was permanently sealed with concrete. His message contained only a few chilling words. Not a mineral deposit. This is a biological structure. Cellular. Like the inside of a stalk. Recommend immediate and permanent quarantine. We are in way over our heads. The report was classified as a trade secret. The miners were reassigned. The story was buried. The official record states that the mine shaft was closed due to a high concentration of toxic gas. Another inconvenient truth, another layer of concrete poured over the past. Sometimes, however, the truth would breach the surface. It would find its way into the public record, if only for a fleeting moment, before the machinery of suppression could grind it back into obscurity. The Flagstaff Sentinel, a small Arizona newspaper, published an article on October 17, 1895. The headline reads, "Local rancher discovers petrified giant." The article, written in the flowery, earnest prose of the era, details the discovery made by a man named William Cody McGregor. While searching for lost cattle in the Badlands near the Little Colorado River, McGregor stumbled upon what he initially thought was a strange rock formation. It was a massive, gray object, partially buried in the eroded hillside. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a section of a tree trunk turned to solid stone. But the scale was impossible. The visible portion measured over 60 feet in diameter. McGregor and his ranch hands spent 2 days excavating the object, uncovering a length of over 200 feet before it disappeared back into the earth. The article describes the object in detail. The clear, defined bark, the massive grain of the wood, the sheer, clean break at one end, as if it had been snapped by an unimaginable force. The article ends with a quote from McGregor. "It's a piece of God's own lumberyard," he said. "The world must have been a different place when this thing was a sapling." What happened next is a familiar pattern. A team of archaeologists from the Smithsonian Institution arrived within a month. They cordoned off the area, praised McGregor for his discovery, and informed the local press that the object was a unique geological concretion, a natural pseudo-fossil, of great interest but no biological origin. They spent 2 weeks at the site, and when they left, the concretion had been completely reburied. The official report, filed in a dusty archive in Washington, concludes that the object was a scientifically insignificant anomaly, likely the result of a peculiar lava flow. The story died. The local paper never mentioned it again. William McGregor became a local curiosity, the old man who claimed to have found a giant's toothpick. His testimony was reduced to folklore. The silencing of direct witnesses is one tactic. The discrediting of expert opinion is another, more insidious one. Enter Dr. Aris Thorne, no relation to the surveyor Elias, but a man who would suffer a similar fate. Thorne was a professor of mineralogy at the University of Wyoming in the 1930s. He was a brilliant but iconoclastic scientist, a man who chafed at the rigid orthodoxies of his field. His particular obsession was the formation known as Devil's Tower. The official explanation, then as now, is that the tower is an igneous intrusion, a plug of molten phonolite porphyry that cooled and fractured into the distinctive hexagonal columns. A story of volcanism and erosion. Thorne didn't buy it. He spent 5 years studying the tower. He rappelled its sheer faces to collect hundreds of samples, analyzed their chemical composition, and mapped their crystalline structure. His research led him to a conclusion that was, for the academic establishment of his time, pure heresy. In 1938, he published a paper in a respected geological journal titled The Biological Origins of Columnar Phonolite, a case study of the Devil's Tower formation. In the paper, Thorne argued that the structure of the tower was inconsistent with any known volcanic process. The chemical purity of the phonolite, the perfect geometry of the columns, and the presence of trace organic polymers that he had identified using a new spectrographic analysis technique. All of it, he claimed, pointed not to a mineral origin, but a biological one. He proposed a radical theory. Devil's Tower was not rock. It was the petrified remains of the vascular bundle of a colossal, silica-based organism. The hexagonal columns were not cooling fractures. They were the fossilized xylem and phloem of a plant of unimaginable scale. He was describing, in the dry language of science, the stalk of a world tree. The reaction from the scientific community was not merely critical. It was violent. He was denounced as a charlatan, a fantasist, a disgrace to his profession. His university, under pressure from its federal grant providers, opened an inquiry into his research methods. His paper was formally retracted by the journal that had published it, an act of almost unheard-of academic censorship. Within a year, Aris Thorne was stripped of his tenure and fired from his position. He was unable to find work in academia ever again. He died in obscurity in 1952, his groundbreaking research dismissed as the ravings of a madman. His work was purged from the libraries, his name a cautionary tale whispered to graduate students who dared to question the established dogma. The witness is silenced. The evidence is buried. The expert is discredited. This is how a secret is kept. It is not a conspiracy of shadowy men in dark rooms, though those men exist. It is a conspiracy of consensus, a conspiracy of comfort. It is the deep, unspoken agreement to not see what is right in front of us, because to see it would be to break the world. And the world they have built for us is a very profitable one. So who were they? Who were these builders of impossible, organic structures? What was this world that existed before ours, a world of life on a scale that dwarfs our most arrogant architectural achievements? The answer requires a leap of imagination, a willingness to discard the comfortable, linear timeline of history they have sold us. This is where we must begin to speak of the ancient world. Not the ancient world of Rome or Greece. Not the primitive world of hunter-gatherers. But a world that predates all of it. A world that was fundamentally different. A world that was destroyed in a cataclysm so complete that its very existence has been erased from our collective memory. This is the theory of the Great Forest. The theory posits that in the distant past, the Earth's environment was radically different. A denser atmosphere, rich in oxygen and other gases, and a more powerful magnetic field, which shielded the surface from cosmic radiation. This environment did not give rise to the carbon-based life we know today. It gave rise to a different kind of biology, a silicon-based biology. Silicon, the primary component of rock, is just below carbon on the periodic table. It shares many of its properties. It can form long, complex molecular chains. In a high-energy, high-pressure environment, it could, theoretically, form the basis for life. Not the soft, fragile, water-dependent life we know, but a crystalline life. A life of immense strength, longevity, and scale. The dominant life form in this ancient world was the Archeborea, or ancient tree, but to call them trees is like calling a supernova a firecracker. They were continent-spanning organisms. Their root systems formed the bedrock of the land. Their trunks, miles in diameter, soared into the upper atmosphere, some reaching heights of 30 or 40 miles. They were not made of cellulose and lignin. They were living crystals, intricate structures of silicon and trace metals that drew energy directly from the planet's powerful electromagnetic field. This was a world of giants, a global forest that regulated the planet's climate and energy systems. The air would have been thick, perhaps even iridescent, and the sky would have been filled with the colossal branches of these world trees, creating a permanent, filtered twilight on the world below. The sounds of this world would have been a low, resonant hum, the thrum of life on a planetary scale. What we call geology is, in fact, biology. The Great Mountain Ranges are not the result of tectonic uplift. They are the skeletal remains of the colossal root systems of this ancient forest. The vast plains and deserts are the scar tissue of the land where these giants were torn from the earth. The layers of sedimentary rock that geologists read like a history book are not layers of silt and sand. They are layers of biological detritus, the compressed dust and pollen of this world-spanning ecosystem. And then came the reset. The cataclysm. The exact nature of the event is unknown. Perhaps it was a celestial event, the impact of a comet or asteroid, or a massive solar flare that stripped away the planet's protective atmosphere. Perhaps it was a terrestrial event, a shift in the planet's core that altered its magnetic field. Whatever the cause, the result was an apocalypse of unimaginable proportions. The high-energy environment that sustained the silicon-based life collapsed. The Archeborea, in an instant of geological time, died. They did not rot or decay like carbon-based life. They petrified. They flash-fossilized. The living, crystalline structures were transformed into what we now call rock. The immense trunks, brittle without the energy that sustained them, shattered under their own colossal weight. The tops, miles high, rained down upon the surface in a cataclysm of fire and stone, creating impact craters and devastation that we now misinterpret as asteroid strikes or volcanic calderas. What was left were the stumps. The great, flat-topped mesas of the American Southwest. The tepuis of Venezuela. The Danxiao landforms of China. These are not the products of erosion. They are the stumps of the world trees, sheared off and weathered over millennia, their true nature disguised by the slow, patient work of wind and water. The world was sterilized. The atmosphere changed. The energy fields dissipated. And in the ruins of this former world, a new, weaker, carbon-based biology began its slow, pathetic climb. Our biology. Our history. A footnote written in the dust of giants. Now, let us return to the evidence, but view it through this new lens. Let us connect the dots. Elias Thorne's impossible plateau in Yosemite? The perfectly flat, circular stump of a Sierra-sized tree, its fibrous, silicon wood grains still visible to those who know what to look for. The national park was established around it not to preserve its beauty, but to restrict access to it, to prevent any other inconvenient surveyors from asking the wrong questions. The hexagonal columns of Devil's Tower? Not a volcanic intrusion. They are exactly what the discredited Elias Thorne claimed they were. The petrified vascular bundle, the fibrous circulatory system that carried energy from the planet's core up into the colossal structure. And it is not unique. The Giant's Causeway in Ireland, the Fingal's Cave in Scotland, they are fragments of the same biological architecture, found all over the world. The Grand Canyon? They tell you a story of a single river, the Colorado, patiently carving its way through a mile of solid rock over millions of years. Does this make sense to you? A small river creating such a vast and intricate scar? Look again. The Grand Canyon is not a feature of erosion. It is a feature of extraction. It is the quarry, the wound left in the earth where a colossal, continent-spanning root system was ripped out. The river is simply a trickle of water following the path of least resistance through the wound that was already there. The institutions know this. They have always known. The Smithsonian Institution, established in the mid-19th century, was not created to be a repository of knowledge for the public. It was created to be a filter, a control mechanism. Its first mission, under the direction of a shadowy cabal of industrialists and political elites, was to scour the continent for any and all evidence of the pre-cataclysm world and either confiscate it or destroy it. Think of the thousands of reports of giant skeletons, humanoids 8, 9, 10 feet tall, unearthed from burial mounds across the Ohio Valley in the 19th century. These reports were common in local newspapers and town records. Where are those skeletons now? The Smithsonian collected them, every single one, and they vanished. The official explanation is that they were misidentified animal bones or outright hoaxes. The truth is they are in a warehouse, a vast, secret collection of evidence that proves that our own human ancestors were once a very different and much larger breed. They were the creatures who lived in the shadow of the great trees. The Department of the Interior, through the National Park Service, became the custodian of the land itself. The creation of the national parks, beginning with Yellowstone in 1872, was a masterstroke of public relations and covert control. They took the most obvious, undeniable evidence of the ancient world, the giant stumps, the petrified forests, the vast geological wounds, and they declared them national treasures. They told the public, this land is so special, so beautiful, you must not touch it. You must stay on the designated paths. You must let us, the experts, manage it for you. They built a beautiful cage and convinced us it was a sanctuary. This entire conspiracy of silence is not just a historical curiosity. It is an ongoing operation. The work is now carried on by a new generation of gatekeepers, the academics and geologists who enforce the dogma of gradualism and uniformitarianism. They are the high priests of the official narrative, and they will viciously attack and professionally destroy anyone who dares to question the sacred texts of their scientific consensus. But the truth has a way of seeping through the cracks. There are modern seekers, independent researchers, armed with the tools of the digital age, who are piecing together the puzzle that was so carefully disassembled. One such seeker is a man we will call the archivist, a former geophysicist for a major oil company. He was fired for unorthodox research methodologies. In reality, he had discovered anomalies in the deep Earth's seismic data, patterns that suggested vast, empty, geometric structures deep within the planet's crust, the fossilized remnants of the ancient root systems. Since his dismissal, he has dedicated his life to uncovering the truth. He spends his days digging through digitized archives of 19th-century newspapers, government reports, and university records. He has compiled a database of over 500 separate incidents, just like the ones involving Elias Thorne and Jacob Ellison. A database of buried reports, silenced witnesses, and confiscated evidence. He cross-references this historical data with modern satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar scans. He is remapping the world as it truly is. His maps show the faint, circular outlines of the great stumps, outlines that are still visible from orbit if you know how to filter the light. They show the vast, branching patterns of the root systems, hidden beneath the thin veneer of what we call topsoil. He is a heretic, of course. He is ignored by the mainstream. His work is published on obscure websites and discussed in hushed tones in online forums. But he is building a case that is becoming impossible to ignore. He is the modern heir to the silenced experts of the past, a digital ghost haunting the machine of the official narrative. The pattern is not limited to North America. To truly grasp the scale of the deception, you must globalize the evidence. You must understand that this was a planetary system, and its destruction was a planetary event. Travel to Venezuela, to the highlands of the Guiana Shield. Here you will find the Great Tepuis, the tabletop mountains that inspired Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. Formations like Mount Roraima and Ollantaytambo rise thousands of feet from the jungle floor, their sheer cliffs culminating in vast, flat plateaus. Geologists will tell you these are remnants of a vast sandstone plateau that has eroded away over millions of years. It is a lazy, nonsensical explanation that ignores the evidence. The sides of the tepuis are not sloped and eroded. They are vertical, often concave, as if they have been sheared. The tops are biologically unique ecosystems, isolated for millennia. Look at them through the lens of the Great Forest Theory. They are not mountains. They are stumps. Stumps of a different species of world tree, perhaps a tropical variant, cut down in the same great cataclysm. The unique ecosystems on their tops are not the result of isolation by erosion. They are the last, lingering remnants of the ancient world's biome, clinging to life on the tombstones of their former home. The local indigenous people, the Pemon, have legends that speak of them not as mountains, but as the trunks of the mighty tree that once held up the sky. Their myths are closer to the truth than our science. Now, go to China. Look at the Danxiao landforms, the famous Rainbow Mountains. These surreal landscapes of multicolored, layered rock are explained away as the result of mineral deposits in sandstone, sculpted by wind and rain. But look at the patterns, the flowing lines, the organic shapes, the cellular structures visible in the rock. This is not erosion. This is petrified tissue. You are looking at the dissected and weathered remains of the internal organs of these colossal silicon life forms. The vibrant colors are not random mineral deposits. They are the fossilized pigments of a biology we can no longer imagine, a landscape of exposed muscle and sinew, turned to stone. Fly over the deserts of North Africa. The mysterious, circular Rikat structure in Mauritania, the Eye of the Sahara, is a perfect, 25-mile-wide circular formation that baffles geologists. They call it a geological dome that has eroded, but they cannot explain its perfect circularity or the lack of any impact evidence. It is a stump, one of the largest and most perfectly preserved on the planet. Its concentric rings are not layers of sedimentary rock. They are the growth rings of a living organism that measured its lifespan in eons. The pattern is everywhere. The same evidence, the same impossible formations, the same lazy, inadequate official explanations, the same indigenous legends of a time of giants and a great cataclysm. It is a single, unified story. A global ecosystem of colossal, silicon-based trees, a planetary civilization of life, that was wiped out in a single, devastating event. And in every place, the evidence is either ignored, misinterpreted, or cordoned off. In America, they used the national park system, a unique and particularly effective method of control. In other parts of the world, they use remoteness, political instability, or the designation of UNESCO World Heritage Sites to achieve the same end, to keep people from looking too closely. The entire apparatus of modern geology, archaeology, and anthropology is built upon the foundational lie that our world is the result of slow, gradual, uniform processes. To admit the truth of the Great Forest would be to tear down the entire edifice of modern science. It would mean admitting that our history is not a gentle slope of progress, but a catastrophic cycle of creation and destruction. It would mean admitting that we are not the masters of this planet. We are just squatters living in a graveyard. So why? Why go to such extraordinary lengths to maintain this lie? Why spend over a century building a global system of suppression and misinformation? The motives are complex, and they escalate in their gravity. The first motive is academic inertia. It is the simple, pathetic protection of dogma. Generations of scientists have built their careers, their reputations, and their entire worldview on the gradualist model. To admit that they are wrong, fundamentally and completely wrong, is unthinkable. It would invalidate a lifetime of work. So they cling to the lie, not out of malice, but out of intellectual cowardice. They ridicule the heretics, they ignore the inconvenient data, and they teach the comfortable lies to the next generation, ensuring the cycle of ignorance continues. It is easier to destroy a man's career than to question a textbook. The second motive is economic. Control of resources. What if these petrified structures are not just inert rock? What if they retain some of their former properties? The report from the Kennecott mine mentioned strange crystalline structures and viscous fluids. The legends of the Pemen in Venezuela speak of the tepuis as sources of great energy. What if this ancient, silicon-based biology holds the key to new forms of energy, new materials, new technologies that would render our entire fossil fuel-based economy obsolete? The powers that control our world have no interest in a technology that cannot be metered, that cannot be controlled, that might free humanity from its dependence on their systems of extraction and exploitation. The secret of the Great Forest might be the secret to unlimited, clean energy. And for that reason alone, it must remain a secret. They would rather keep us burning the fossilized remains of our own primitive carbon-based world than allow us access to the legacy of the far superior one that came before. But the third and most profound motive is philosophical. It is about the control of the human spirit. The entire narrative of modern civilization is built on the idea of human primacy. We are the chosen ones, the pinnacle of evolution, the most intelligent and powerful species to have ever existed on this planet. Our religions, our political systems, our economic models, they are all predicated on this fundamental arrogance. What happens to that narrative if we learn that we are nothing more than ants crawling on the stumps of beings so vast that we cannot even comprehend their scale? What happens if we learn that our entire history is just a brief, flickering moment in the aftermath of a far grander and more significant age? Our sense of importance would shatter. Our belief in our own destiny would evaporate. The authority of the institutions that claim to lead us would be revealed as a hollow charade. If they have been lying to us about something this fundamental, this enormous, what else have they been lying about? Everything. To maintain control, they must maintain the lie. They must keep us small. They must keep us believing that we are the most important thing in the universe, that the world is ours to conquer and exploit. They must keep us disconnected from the true history of our planet, a history so awesome and terrible that it would forever change our perception of our place in the cosmos. The truth of the Great Forest is not just a scientific theory. It is a spiritual revolution, and that is what they fear most. Let us return, for a final moment, to the man we started with. Elias Thorne. He lived out his days in a small town in Ohio, working as a county land surveyor. He never spoke of what he saw in the Sierra Nevada. He kept the secret, as he was instructed. He married, had children, and lived a quiet, unremarkable life. But the secret ate at him. An independent researcher, the same one who found the logger's letters, managed to track down Thorne's great-granddaughter in the late 1990s. In an old chest in her attic, she found his private journal, the one he had started after the government confiscated his original. Most of it contained mundane entries about his life in Ohio. But on the last page, written in a shaky, aged hand just weeks before his death in 1931, was a final entry. A confession, a testament. "They took my maps," he wrote, "but they could not take the memory. I close my eyes and I am standing there still, on that impossible plain. The silence, the great, sweeping grain in the stone. I have spent 40 years trying to convince myself that it was a dream, a trick of the light and the thin air. But I know what I saw. I stood on the tombstone of a god. They told me the map was too accurate to be useful. I think now they meant the truth is too large to be permitted. We are children, living in a house we did not build, and we have mistaken the floorboards for the whole of creation. I do not know what is worse, the lie they have told us, or the truth they are so desperate to hide. I think perhaps they are one and the same. The truth does not need to be shouted. It only needs to be whispered, and it is whispered by the land itself. It is in the sheer cliffs of Zion, the hexagonal columns of the tower, the impossible flatness of the mesas. The evidence is not buried in an archive. You are standing on it. They have drawn their maps and built their parks and written their textbooks, and they believe they have succeeded in erasing the past. They believe they have contained the truth. But the truth, like a tree, has roots, and they run deeper than any lie they could ever hope to build. The world is not what they say it is. The rocks are not rocks. The mountains are not mountains. They built the parks to hide a forest, but they forgot that the evidence is the world itself, and it is waiting, patiently, for us to learn how to see again.